Good morning, seventh grade. Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. And so we're ready to get back into this whole integer thing. Noticed on Friday we were adding integers, and I hope you got that kind of figured out, especially if you're adding a negative, if you're, how that works. All right. So today we're looking at subtracting integers. And they start off kind of in an interesting way in what they're trying to show you, okay, by looking at patterns. And, that's always kind of a good thing. I ask quite often, too, what's the pattern? What pattern do you see? And so notice what the pattern they're doing. So they have 4 minus 3 equals 1. Then they have 4 minus 2, so they're 1 less here. So we're taking away 1 less, so we're going to have 1 more. 4 minus 1 is 3. 4 minus 0 is 4. And then watch. So now they have 4 minus a negative 1. See, we're just going down 1 each time. So 4 minus a negative 1 is 5. Okay? And 4 minus a negative 2, if you're following the pattern, that would be 6. All right? And so that's just subtracting. All right? And so then watch, how they have this labeled. This is just subtracting. So now this one, they are calling this adding the opposite. So look at what they're doing here. They're taking 4 and they're adding a negative 3. Now if you think back at that a little bit, we're putting together positives and negatives. Remember, a positive and negative cancel each other out. All right? And so adding a negative 3 to this, 3 is going to cancel out 3 of these. Your answer is going to be 1. Adding a negative 2, you get an answer of 2. Adding a negative 3, you get an answer of 3. Oops, sorry. I went the wrong way. Goofy. Okay. Then 4 plus 0 again is 4. Then 4 plus 1 equals 5, and 4 plus 2 equals 6. So notice we're doing something different. Here we're subtracting a positive. Here we're adding a negative or a positive. We're adding the opposite. Okay? And then notice that they're subtracting again. And in subtraction, this subtract. In this subtraction, notice we've got 4 minus 1 is 3. 4 minus 2 is 2. 4 minus 1 is 4 minus 3 is 1. 4 minus 4 is 0. 4 minus 5 is a negative 1. 4 minus 6 is a negative 2. All right? Now, notice before, and it may still be in your head to where your brain will argue with you a little bit. But when we start doing these, something that your first or second grade teacher told you about how you can't subtract a bigger number from a smaller number. Now, some of you have figured out since then that you can. It would just give you a negative number, or you'd go in the hole. All right? But the reason why they told you that was because first, second grade, you weren't ready to talk about integers and negative numbers. All right? So now, notice here now, we've subtracted positives and negatives. So then the last thing that they have is adding the opposite. So here we showed you just regular subtraction and then adding the opposite. And here we're showing you subtracting and adding the opposite. And so what here, so we're doing 4 plus a negative 1. 4 plus a negative 1 is going to be 3. 4 plus a negative 2 is going to be 2. 4 plus a negative 3 is going to be 1. 4 plus a negative 4 is going to be 0. Okay? 4 plus a negative 5 is going to be negative 1. 4 plus a negative 6 is going to be negative 2. So notice what you're doing here and what you're getting is if you're subtracting a number or you're adding a negative, you're going to get the same answer in all of these, okay? So if we're subtracting a number, all right, or if we're adding a negative, we're going to get the same answer, all right? And they sum that whole thing up. They say, noticing that subtracting an integer gives the same answer as adding its opposite. So here we were subtracting 1. Here we were adding the opposite of 1, which is negative 1. Here we were subtracting 2. Here we were adding the opposite of 2, negative 2. So that's just the general statement, that when you're adding an integer, it's the same as subtracting its opposite. Okay? And then they have this definition down there in the middle, and it just says subtraction of an integer is the same as adding its opposite. And it says for any integers, and they use the variables a and b. And then they show you a general equation that a minus b equals a plus negative b. Okay? And that's it. that's the thing, that's the trick on subtraction or adding when you're adding integers. Okay? So when you're doing subtraction, okay, when you're subtracting an integer, it's the same as adding its opposite. Okay? So notice when I was subtracting, or when I was subtracting a negative, you got the same answer as adding its opposite. Okay? When I was subtracting over here, this 5, that was the same as adding the opposite of 5, negative 5. All right? So, hope that helps a little bit. And you've got some other exercises over here on page 494, and then your homework are the evens. They're on page 494. If you have questions, ask out on Classroom, or send me an email asking a question, and we'll see you out here again tomorrow. Take care. God bless.